The story for this week is called Joe Green's Lunch. It was a little past noon, and a merry group of boys were seated on the grass under the trees that shaded the academy playgrounds. A little later, they would be scattered in every direction at their play. But first, they must attend to the contents of the well-filled pails and baskets of lunch. "I should like to know," said Howard Colby, "why Joe Green never comes out here to eat his dinner with the rest of us. He always sneaks off somewhere until we get through. Guess he brings so many goodies he is afraid we will rob him," said another. "I don't think so," said Will Brown, throwing himself back upon the grass. "More likely he doesn't bring anything at all. I heard my father say the family is badly pinched since Mr. Green was killed. Mother said she didn't pity them, for folks had no business to be poor and proud." "Well," said Sam Merrill, "I know that Mary Green asked my mother to let her have some sewing to do, but then folks do that sometimes who aren't poor." "And Joe is wearing patched pants," said Howard Colby. "I tell you what, boys," said Will Brown, "let's watch tomorrow to see what the fellow does bring. You know he is always in his seat by the time first bell rings, and we can get a peep into his basket before roll call." The boys agreed to this, all but Ned Collins, who sat quietly eating his dinner. He had taken no part in the conversation. Now he simply remarked as he brushed the crumbs from his lap, "I can't see what fun there will be in that, and it looks mean and sneaking to me. I'm sure it's none of your business what Joe brings for dinner, or where he goes to eat it." "You're always nicey nice, Ned Collins," said Will Brown contemptuously. Ned could not bear to be laughed at. His eyes flashed for a minute, and then he sprang up and shouted, "Hurrah, boys, for football!" In 5 minutes the whole playground was an uproar of fun and frolic. The next morning, at the first stroke of the bell, a half-dozen roguish faces peeped into the classroom. Sure enough, there was Joe Green, busily plying his pencil over the problems of the algebra lesson. It was but the work of an instant to hurry into the cloakroom, and soon the whole group was pressing around Will Brown as he held the mysterious basket in his hand. Among them, in spite of the remonstrance of yesterday, was Ned Collins. "It's big enough to hold a day's ration for a regiment," said Harry Forbes, as Will pulled out a nice white napkin. Next came a whole newspaper, a large one too, and then in the bottom of the basket was one cold potato. That was all. Will held it up with a comical grimace, and the boys laughed loudly. "See here," said Howard. "Let's throw it away and fill the basket with coal. It will be much fun to see him open it." The boys agreed, and the basket was soon filled and the napkin placed carefully on the top. Before the bell rang, they were on their way to class. Ned Collins was the last one to leave the room. No sooner did the last head disappear than, quick as a flash, he emptied the coal into the box again, replaced the paper, and half filled the basket, large as it was, with the contents of the bright tin pail that Aunt Sally delighted to store with dainties for his dinner. Ned was in his seat almost as soon as the rest, and all through the forenoon he looked and felt as guilty as the others, as he saw the sly looks and winks they exchanged. Noon came, and there was the usual rush to the cloakroom for dinner baskets. But instead of going out to the yard, the boys lingered about the door in the hall. Straight by them marched Ned Collins, his pail under his arm. "Hello, Ned," said Sam Merrill. "Where are you going now?" "Home." said Ned, laughing. "I saw Aunt Sally making some extra cookies to eat this morning, and they can't cheat me out of my share." "Ask me to go too," shouted Howard Colby. At that moment the boys spied Joe Green carrying his basket into the schoolroom. "I should think he'd suspect something," whispered Will Brown. "The coal must be awful heavy." Joe disappeared into the schoolroom, and the curious eyes that peeped through the crack of the door were soon rewarded by seeing him open his basket. "Hope his dinner won't lie hard on his stomach," whispered Howard Colby. But apparently Joe only wished to get his paper to read, for he took it by the corner and pulled. But it stuck fast. He looked in with surprise and then took out in a sort of bewildered way a couple of Aunt Sally's fat sandwiches, one of the delicious round pies he had so often seen in Ned's hands, a bottle of milk, and some nuts and raisins. It was a dinner fit for a king, so Joe thought, and so did the boys as they peeped into their hiding place. But Joe did not offer to taste it. He only sat there and looked at it. Then he laid his hand on his desk and put his head down on it. And Freddie Wilson, one of the smaller of the boys, whispered, "I guess he's praying." So they all stole away to the playground without speaking a word. "That's some of Ned Collins' work," said Will Brown after a while. "It's just like him." "I'm glad of it, anyway," said Sam Merle. "I've felt mean all forenoon. The Greens are not to blame for having only cold potatoes to eat, and I don't wonder Joe didn't want all of us fellas to know it." Will Brown began to feel uncomfortable. "Father says Mr. Green was a brave man," said Sam Merle, "and that he wouldn't have been killed if he hadn't thought of everyone else before himself." "I tell you what," said good-natured Tom Granger, "I move that we give 3 cheers to Ned Collins." The boys sprang to their feet and, swinging their caps in the air, gave 3 hearty cheers for Ned Collins. Then Will Brown joined in the chorus with a loud hurrah. Later that day Sam Merle explained the whole matter to Ned, but he only replied, "I've often heard Aunt Sally say it's poor fun that must be earned by hurting someone's